Life moves quickly, and as sure as your gorgeous toddler will start talking back and sneaking out at night when they're 17, you won't be needing that playroom with the blackboard wall and sandpit in the middle. Planning for the changing needs of a growing family can save you a lot of money and hassle if you do it at the very start. Well, designer Frances Cosway from White Pebble Interiors has just published Your Forever Home, a guide to help homeowners future-proof their home at the design stage. And she joins us now from our Melbourne studio. There she is, Frances. Great to see you. Thank you so much for this. Well, I guess just firstly, what are some of the big mistakes that people make when they're designing a home and they're at that stage of life when they have young children?
I think some of the things that some of the key mistakes that people make is actually not really reviewing the floor plan right at the start and really making sure that not only is it going to be suitable for them now when they perhaps have small children, but also much later on when their children grow up. So it's really assessing the floor plan to make sure that there's lots of flexibility to make spaces adaptable and flexible for when the family's needs and requirements change over time.
Frances, I'm guessing that's where the doors come in. You recommend having rooms with doors. Why so?
I do. Yeah, I definitely do. When you've got doors, especially if they're double sliding doors, for example, in a second living area that you may have, so you've got all your open plan out the back, and you may have a second room that may be a second living area with double sliding doors that actually retract back into the walls. That can actually be used in many different ways. So, for example, when your children are young, you may have that as a playroom, and then the doors may be open because they like to be with you all the time. And then later on, when your children are a little bit older, you may actually be able to utilise that space as some sort of study area with some desks in it. But having the doors actually allows you to create not only privacy, so later on again that room may become a spare room, or it may be an office and be multifunctional, also have a sofa bed in there. So if you've got doors, it allows you to be able to zone that room off, not only from heating and cooling, so that that room can be heated or cooled in isolation from the rest of the house, or the rest of the house could be, or that room could just be heated or cooled in isolation. So having the doors gives you a lot more flexibility for privacy, opening them so that you've got the illusion of space at any given point in time, for example, if it was a living area, but then also it could become a spare room. So doors give you flexibility in essence.
And you're quite clear, because obviously open plan living is so popular, isn't it? But you're very clear that you're not against open plan living, but you just need to be clever about how you do it.
Absolutely. Particularly in Australia, we love our own open plan living. We have a casual lifestyle, and we love having that informal setting. So open plan living is still very much of essence of our designs in here in Australia. But having the other rooms and being able to zone and having them with the doors, for example, and creating different zones within a home means that you can create smaller spaces. So, for example, in winter, you may have a room that is much more cosy. You may not necessarily want to be in that open plan living in winter. You want to retreat to something else. So definitely zoning as well as having the open plan is really what I am passionate about with design.
So let's go through each room. What should we think about when it comes to, say, for example, the home office?
Okay, so with a home office, again, that could be a space that may have many different purposes over the duration, because if you're building, you may be thinking of being in a space for 10, 20, 30 years. So initially you may have a room set up as a home office. I think the key with that is not necessarily having fixed cabinetry in place, because if you've got just furniture that is in the space rather than fixed cabinetry, it means that you're able to not only change the layout within that space, so have your desk facing different ways, perhaps depending on the seasons and the view, but also it means that when you don't necessarily want an office anymore, you may retire, that you're able to use that space as something else. So that, for example, could become a spare room if you need it to do that. So again, it's about creating that flexibility and not necessarily fixing on that space is always going to be what that room was originally designed for example, as an office.
What about the bedrooms and that sort of perennial debate about the master and whether it should be downstairs or upstairs, or what's your thinking on this?
Well, really, if you want it future-proof, which I suppose if we are spending so much time, money and effort on a house we are planning to be in for quite some time, you want to think about, yes, we might be agile when we're younger, but what happens when we are a little bit older? And we sometimes don't always want to think about that. But the reality is, if we want to be able to stay in the house longer, having the master bedroom on the floor where your kitchen and your bathroom and all your services are means ultimately that you're able to stay in that home longer. So the upstairs could still be used as spare rooms and where the kids and the grandkids may go. But if you're able to ultimately live all on one level, you are going to be able to stay there longer. So having it downstairs is definitely the preference. And from what I understand from real estate agents, certainly in my area, is that houses with a master bedroom downstairs are actually getting a premium because people know they're going to be able to stay in that house longer.
That's really interesting. Frances, what about multiple living areas? When I was growing up, my parents had this dining room which was pristine. We weren't allowed in there. So it was pretty much ineffective. Do we have too many living rooms?
I think the days of having a formal dining and a casual dining area are sort of really going. We live in this open plan area, and it's actually now the kitchen bench that is becoming sort of the casual dining area, and then we have our adjacent normally to there, we've got some sort of dining space. So I don't think they're necessarily going, but dining areas are now also becoming multifunctional in themselves. Inevitably, whether we like it or not, our children will ultimately sit at the dining table or the kitchen bench and do their study. So we probably need to factor that in at floor plan stage too, that if they are going to be doing that, well, let's make sure the lighting's right and let's make sure that they can do that, because even if they have got a study, chances are they'll end up at the dining table.
Oh, for sure. Another great point that you make is that it's really important to space plan, you call it, before signing off on your floor plan, so that, you know, things like you make sure you've got a spot for your TV, that you know your furniture's going to fit, that your bedroom, you can change the layout of things. Just explain that for us.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. And I suppose what I encourage people to do at floor plan stage, and really looking at all these things at floor plan stage before you're out of the grand building, is critical. So it's a little bit of a cut and paste exercise, but it's effectively drawing your furniture or the furniture that you know you'd like to have in that space to scale as the floor plan is, the same scale, and then being able to sort of have a little of a play around with it and see the sorts of different configurations you can have in that room. And what that allows you to do is make sure that, one, the windows are in the location and that you're not necessarily got a window where you don't need it. But also things like, as you say, the TV, key pieces of artwork, even where your lamps and your ambient lighting is going to be. If you space plan that out initially, you won't move in and think, oh, I don't actually have a wall for that beautiful piece of artwork that I love so much. You've gone through all the detail right up front at floor plan stage, so there's no surprises when you move in. So it really is a critical thing, but it's often forgotten because people are so keen to get out of the ground. But it's so important to make sure that everything's going to end up exactly where you want it to be when you move in.
Not only space, but accessibility as well, Frances. You mentioned lighting as well before, and these are all just little facets that I would never even consider if I wanted to future-proof my home. But accessibility, I imagine, would be massive.
It is, and again, it comes down to being able to stay in your home as long as you can. So accessibility is things around having hallways that are relatively wide, and again, we don't want to think about the fact that maybe we'll end up in a wheelchair, or we may not be able to climb stairs as easily as we can when we're younger. But if we've planned for that, we can stay there. So also things like showers and having not necessarily a door on the shower, but having a space to get in and out of the shower that's wide enough so that you can actually get in and out of there quite easily. And even if we were to have some sort of accident and temporarily we were in a wheelchair or not being able to get in and out of areas very easily, that's going to assist with that. And baths are very difficult to step in and out of when we're older. Our joints are not as good anymore. So just having an open plan shower makes that accessibility so much easier.